twin sons of Zara, 7 beat down on the dunes like twin forges, turning the air above the sand into a rippling sheet of molten glass. Captain Ren Voss crouched behind a jagged outcrop of obsidian rock, sweat carving clean lines through the grime on his face. His pulse rifle felt slick in his grip, not from the heat, though that was bad enough, but from the knot of dread coiling in his gut. Below, nestled in the hollow of a dried-up riverbed, sat Outpost Krell. A squat, sand-blasted fortress bristling with plasma turrets and crawling with Skarn mercenaries. And somewhere inside that concrete tomb, according to shaky intel from a dying scout drone, was Lyra. Ren had only met her once, during the joint briefing 3 cycles ago. She'd stood tall and silent among the Silver Concord diplomats, her blue skin shimmering faintly under the briefing room's cool lights, long white hair braided tightly down her back like spun moonlight. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and the color of storm clouds, had locked onto his for a heartbeat too long when he'd outlined the recon plan. No words, just that look. Now, that look haunted him more than the heat or the Skarn patrols circling below like vultures. The mission had been simple. Infiltrate, gather data on Skarn energy signatures, exfiltrate. No engagement. But then the comms had crackled with Lyra's voice, sharp with pain and static, reporting that her extraction shuttle had been shot down during a sandstorm. She'd taken refuge in Krell's auxiliary comms bunker, thinking it abandoned, only to find herself trapped when the Skarn moved in. Now, Ren's squad was pinned down 2 clicks east, and Command was debating orbital strikes that would vaporize the whole base. And Lyra with it. "Screw the debate," Ren muttered, slapping a fresh power cell into his rifle. He wasn't waiting for committee approval to let a comrade burn. Especially not her. He moved like a shadow across the scorching sand, using every ripple and rock for cover. The Skarn weren't known for their vigilance, more for their brutality, but luck only stretched so far. Halfway to the base perimeter, a proximity drone zipped overhead, its single red eye scanning. Ren froze, pressing himself flat against the hot stone. The drone hovered, whirring softly. He held his breath. Then, with a soft click, it veered away. He exhaled, tasting dust and adrenaline. Getting inside was easier than expected. The Skarn had left a service hatch unsealed, probably for smuggling rations or worse. Ren slipped through, into the dim, humid belly of the base. The air smelled of ozone, sweat, and something acrid. Skarn rations, maybe. He crept through narrow corridors lined with flickering biolume strips, his boots silent on the grated floor. Every corner held the threat of a patrol. He passed a mess hall where 3 hulking Skarn were arguing over a game of dice, their guttural laughter echoing off the walls. Ren ducked into a side alcove, heart hammering. Then he heard it, a muffled cry cut short, from a sealed chamber down the hall. The comms bunker. He didn't hesitate. He planted a shaped charge on the door's lock, stepped back, and triggered it. The blast was small but sharp, blowing the door inward with a metallic groan. Inside, Lyra was backed into a corner, her silver-armored forearms raised in defense, one hand clutching a broken data spike like a dagger. 2 Skarn loomed over her, their reptilian faces twisted in cruel amusement. One reached for her hair. Ren fired. The first Skarn dropped before it knew it was dead. The second spun, roaring, but Ren was already moving, ducking under a wild swing, driving his combat knife up under the creature's jaw. It gurgled and collapsed. Silence rushed in, broken only by their ragged breathing. Lyra stared at him, eyes wide. Her blue skin was smudged with soot, a cut bleeding faintly above her brow, but she was alive. "You came," she said, her voice softer than he remembered, laced with disbelief. "Couldn't let them keep you," Ren said, offering a hand. "Not after you called me reckless during the briefing." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I said admirably reckless. There's a difference." He grinned despite himself. "Let's get out of here before they notice the mess." But they were already noticed. Alarms blared through the base. A deep, pulsing wail that set Ren's teeth on edge. Red lights strobed. Shouts echoed down the corridor. They were trapped. Lyra moved to the comms console, fingers flying over the cracked interface. "They've locked down the main exits. But there's a secondary conduit leads to the old geothermal vent below the base. It's unstable, but it's our only way." "Unstable how?" Ren asked, already scanning the room for weapons or explosives. "If we trigger a cascade failure in the core," she said, meeting his eyes, "it'll blow the whole base, but we'd have maybe 90 seconds to clear the blast radius." Ren didn't flinch. 90 seconds is plenty. He'd studied the base schematics during the approach. The geothermal core sat directly beneath the command center, a pressurized chamber of superheated plasma, kept stable by magnetic regulators. If those failed, well, it wouldn't just be an explosion. It'd be a miniature sun blooming in the desert. While Lyra worked on bypassing the safety protocols, Ren scavenged what he could. 2 plasma grenades, a medkit, and a half-charged sidearm. He tossed her the pistol. She caught it with fluid grace, her movements precise despite her injuries. "You trust me with this?" she asked. "I trust you more than I trust my own aim right now," he said, strapping the grenades to his belt. The console beeped. "I've overridden the regulator sequence," Lyra said. "But it'll take 60 seconds to destabilize. Once it starts, there's no stopping it." "Then we run like hell," Ren said. They burst out of the bunker just as a squad of Skarn rounded the corner. Gunfire erupted. Ren shoved Lyra behind him, returning fire with controlled bursts. 1 Skarn went down. Another took cover. Lyra leaned out, firing with surprising accuracy. Her shot took the 3rd Skarn clean through the eye. "I was a sharpshooter before I became a diplomat," she said dryly, reloading. "Good to know," Ren panted. "Now move." They sprinted down the corridor, alarms screaming around them. The floor began to tremble. A low, rising hum filled the air, the sound of the core waking up. Steam hissed from vents. Panels sparked. The base was coming apart at the seams. They reached the access shaft just as the first explosion rocked the upper levels. Debris rained down. Ren boosted Lyra up into the narrow tunnel, then scrambled in after her. The shaft was dark, hot, and sloped steeply downward. They slid more than climbed, skin burning on the metal rungs. Behind them, the hum became a roar. Light flared up the shaft, white-hot and hungry. "Faster!" Lyra yelled. They burst out into the open desert just as the ground beneath the base buckled. A fireball erupted skyward, swallowing the outpost whole in a pillar of orange and blue flame. The shockwave hit them like a physical blow, throwing them forward into the sand. Ren rolled, shielding Lyra with his body as rocks and shrapnel rained down. When the dust settled, Outpost Krell was gone. In its place, a smoking crater glowed faintly in the twilight. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of violet and crimson. They lay there for a moment, breathing hard, covered in grit and sweat. Then Lyra sat up, brushing sand from her white hair. She looked at Ren, really looked at him, her storm-gray eyes searching his face. "You blew up an entire base, for me?" Ren sat up too, wincing as a bruise on his ribs protested. "Technically, I blew it up to stop the Skarn from using it as a staging ground. You were just conveniently inside." She snorted, a surprisingly human sound. "Liar." He grinned. "Maybe a little." They started walking toward the rendezvous point, the desert stretching endlessly around them. The air cooled quickly, stars pricking through the violet veil above. Lyra limped slightly, but she refused his offer to carry her. "I'm not fragile human," she said, though there was no bite in it. "Never said you were," Ren replied. "Just thought you might enjoy the view from my shoulders." She rolled her eyes, but he caught the faintest blush along her blue cheeks. As they walked, they talked, really talked. Not mission briefings or tactical updates, but real conversation. She told him about her homeworld, a planet of crystalline forests and silver seas, where music was woven from light and memory. He told her about Earth's oceans, now mostly poisoned, but still beautiful in old vids. They laughed about the absurdity of military rations. "Your nutrient paste tastes like regret," she'd said. They argued about whether plasma rifles were overrated. She insisted pulse carbines were superior. He disagreed vehemently. And when silence fell between them, it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like they'd known each other for cycles instead of hours. 3 days later, they reached the Allied forward camp, a sprawling tent city nestled between 2 mesas, buzzing with humans, Silver Concord envoys, and a dozen other species united against the Skarn incursion. Cheers went up as they staggered in. Medics swarmed them, but Ren waved them off until Lyra was seen to first. That night, under a sky thick with alien constellations, they sat on a sandstone ledge overlooking the camp. A fire crackled between them, casting long shadows. Someone had given them real coffee, strong and bitter, and a plate of something that resembled roasted lizard but tasted surprisingly good. "You know," Lyra said, staring into the flames. "Back home, They say that when two souls survive a fire together, their fates become entwined. Ren sipped his coffee. Sounds like poetry. It is, but also truth. She turned to him. I don't believe in fate, but I do believe in choices. And you chose to come for me. He met her gaze. I'd do it again. She smiled. A real, full smile that lit up her whole face. Good. Because I'm not done with you yet, Captain Voss. He laughed, the sound warm in the cool desert air. Likewise, Ambassador Lyra. But she shook her head. Not Ambassador tonight. Just Lyra. Just Ren then. They sat in silence for a while, shoulders almost touching. The camp buzzed below. Radios crackling, engines humming, distant laughter. The war wasn't over. The Skarn still held half the sector. Reinforcements were coming. But for this one moment, under the alien stars, there was peace. Then a runner approached, saluting sharply. Captain Voss, Ambassador Lyra, command wants you both at the strategy tent. Urgent intel. Skarn fleet movements near the Helios rift. Ren sighed, standing. Duty calls. Lyra rose too, brushing sand from her silver armor. Then let's go make some more choices. As they walked back toward the lights of the camp, Ren couldn't help but glance at her. The way the starlight caught in her white hair, the quiet strength in her stride. He'd blown up a base for her. He'd walk through fire for her again. And somehow, in the middle of a desert war on a planet neither of them called home, that felt less like madness and more like the only sane thing left to do. The next morning, they stood before the holographic war table, surrounded by generals and admirals from a dozen worlds. The Skarn were massing near the Helios rift, a narrow corridor of space littered with gravitational anomalies and ancient ruins. It was a perfect ambush point, and the Allied fleet was walking right into it. We need someone on the ground, said General Torvak, a grizzled human with a cybernetic eye. Someone who can disable the Skarn jamming array hidden in the ruins. Without comms, our fleet is blind. All eyes turned to Ren and Lyra. They just returned from Krell. They were exhausted, but they were also the best team for the job. Lyra stepped forward. We'll go. Ren nodded. Give us a ship and a window. As they left the tent, Lyra nudged him with her elbow. Another suicide mission? Just another Tuesday, he said. She laughed, and the sound made the weight of the coming mission feel a little lighter. Their ship, a sleek Concord-modified scout vessel named Whisperwind, cut through the void like a blade. Below them, the Helios rift churned with cosmic storms and shattered asteroids. The ruins loomed ahead, a ring of black stone monoliths, humming with dark energy. Skarn patrol ships circled like sharks. Remember Krell? Lyra asked, fingers dancing over the NAV console. Hard to forget, Ren said, powering up the stealth systems. Though I'd prefer not to blow up another base. My insurance premiums are through the roof. She shot him a look. You don't have insurance. I will if I survive this. They slipped past the patrols, landing silently in the shadow of the largest monolith. The air outside was thin and cold, the gravity oddly light. Ruins stretched in every direction. Crumbling towers, broken arches, strange glyphs glowing faintly on the stone. The jamming array is in the central spire, Lyra said, consulting her scanner. Heavily guarded. Of course it is, Ren muttered, checking his rifle. Lead the way. They moved through the ruins like ghosts. The Skarn were everywhere. Patrols, snipers, automated turrets. But Ren and Lyra had fallen into a rhythm now. He covered her while she hacked a security terminal. She created a diversion while he took out a turret nest. They communicated in gestures, in glances, in the quiet certainty that the other had their back. Halfway to the spire, they were cornered in a narrow alley by a Skarn heavy squad. Plasma bolts scorched the stone around them. Ren pulled Lyra behind a fallen pillar, his rifle overheating. We're pinned, he growled. Lyra's eyes narrowed. She pulled a small device from her belt, a Concord resonance emitter. Cover your ears. He did. She activated it. A high-pitched whine filled the air, then escalated into a deafening shriek. The Skarn clutched their heads, howling in pain, their auditory systems overloaded. Ren didn't waste the opening. He mowed them down with precise bursts. When it was over, he looked at her, impressed. Where'd you get that? Diplomatic gift, she said, tucking it away. Turns out my people are big on non-lethal solutions, until they're not. He grinned. I like your people. They reached the spire. Inside, the jamming array pulsed with sickly green light. Lyra went to work on the console, her fingers flying. 10 minutes, she said. Maybe less if I can bypass the encryption. Ren stood guard at the entrance, watching the ruins. The sky darkened as the Allied fleet approached. Dozens of ships, their running lights like distant stars. The Skarn fleet stirred, engines flaring to life. Hurry, he said. I'm hurrying, she snapped, then softened. Almost there. Then the alarms blared. Reinforcements. A dozen Skarn poured into the chamber, weapons raised. Ren fired, taking down 2 before they could react. But more kept coming. He was outgunned, outmanned. He fell back toward Lyra, firing from the hip. Lyra, go. I'll hold them. She didn't look up. Not happening. With a final keystroke, the array powered down. The green light died. Across the rift, the Allied fleet's comms flickered back to life. Cheers erupted over the open channel. But the Skarn weren't done. Their leader, a hulking brute with a scarred face, charged at Lyra, blade drawn. Ren lunged, tackling the Skarn to the ground. They rolled, punching, kicking, biting. The Skarn was stronger, but Ren was faster. He drove his knife into its throat and rolled away, gasping. Silence. Lyra stood over him, rifle smoking. Took you long enough. He laughed weakly. Had to make it dramatic. They limped back to the Whisperwind as the battle raged above. The Allied fleet, now coordinated, tore into the Skarn lines. Explosions lit up the void like fireworks. Back on the ship, Lyra patched Ren's wounds while he piloted them away from the chaos. You're getting careless, she said, pressing a med seal to a gash on his arm. Or maybe I just trust you to have my back, he said. She paused, then met his eyes. Always. They flew in silence for a while, watching the stars. The war wasn't over. There would be more battles, more ruins, more impossible choices. But as the Whisperwind slipped into the safety of Allied space, Ren knew one thing for certain. He wasn't facing it alone anymore. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the ship's engines, in the way her hand lingered on his shoulder a second too long, he thought maybe, just maybe, she felt the same. The victory at Helios Rift tasted like ash. Back at the Allied forward base on Zara 7, the command tent buzzed with celebration. Holofeeds replayed the Skarn fleet's disarray. Admirals clapped Ren on the back, and someone even produced a bottle of real Earth whiskey. But Ren barely touched it. He sat on the edge of his cot in the dimmed medbay annex, watching Lyra through the open flap. She was deep in conversation with a Silver Concord envoy, a tall, severe-looking elder with silver tattoos coiling up his neck. Her posture was stiff, her usual calm replaced by something sharper, guarded. Ren had seen that look before. It was the look of someone receiving orders they didn't like. Later that night, under a sky streaked with auroras from the planet's magnetic storms, she found him cleaning his rifle by the perimeter watchfire. They're recalling me, she said without preamble. Ren didn't look up. To Concord Prime? No, to the Vale Enclave. There's a tribunal. He finally met her eyes. For what? For unauthorized alliance with a human operative. For compromising diplomatic neutrality during the Krell incident. She let out a bitter laugh. They say I endangered the entire Concord human coalition by letting emotion override protocol. Emotion? Ren stood, tossing the cleaning rag aside. You mean surviving? You mean not letting the Skarn turn you into a trophy? It's not about logic to them, she said softly. It's about precedent. If one ambassador acts on personal judgment, others might follow. And in their eyes, personal judgment is chaos. Ren stepped closer. Then don't go. I have to, she said. If I refuse, they'll strip my rank, exile me from the Concord. I'd be a ghost. And if you go, I might still be a ghost, she admitted. Just one with a trial first. He wanted to argue, to drag her onto the Whisperwind and vanish into the outer sectors. But he saw the resolve in her storm-gray eyes, the same resolve that had kept her alive in Krell's bunker. She wasn't asking for rescue. She was telling him goodbye. They stood in silence as the wind howled across the dunes. Then, impulsively, Ren reached out and tucked a loose strand of her white hair behind her ear. Her skin was cool to the touch, even in the desert night. If they try to lock you away, he said, voice low, I'll blow up their whole damn enclave. She smiled faintly, admirably reckless. Always. She left at dawn aboard a sleek Concord courier ship, its hull shimmering like liquid mercury. Ren watched it vanish into the upper atmosphere, fists clenched at his sides. 3 days later, A coded message arrived, not through military channels, but via a smuggler's data chip slipped into his ration pack. It contained coordinates, a timestamp, and 2 words: trust no one. The coordinates pointed to a derelict mining station orbiting a dead moon in the Keswick Belt, neutral space, lawless and forgotten. Wren requisitioned the Whisperwind under the guise of a long-range recon mission. Command didn't question it. After Helios Rift, he could have asked for a moon buggy and they'd have handed him the keys. The station was a rusted skeleton drifting in silence. Inside, the air was stale, gravity flickering. He found her in the central chamber, bathed in the dim glow of a portable holoprojector. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a figure Wren hadn't seen in years. Commander Vela Rook, former Alliance intelligence, presumed dead after a Skarn ambush on Cygnus 9. Her face was scarred, her left arm replaced with a matte black cybernetic limb, but her eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, and utterly unreadable. "Wren," she said, nodding. "Still blowing things up for love? Still faking your death for fun?" He shot back. Lyra stepped between them. "Enough. We don't have time for old grudges." She activated the holoprojector. A star map bloomed in the air, pulsing with red markers. "The Skarn aren't acting alone," she said. "They're being supplied advanced plasma cores, neural disruptors, even Concord-grade encryption tech. Someone inside the Alliance is feeding them." Wren frowned. "Who?" "That's what we need to find out," Vela said. "And Lyra's tribunal? It's a setup. They're using it to isolate her, discredit her, and remove her from the chain of command before she uncovers the truth." Lyra's voice dropped. "I found encrypted logs in the Concord diplomatic archives. References to a Project Chimera, a Black Ops initiative to create a hybrid Skarn human soldier. The project was shut down, officially. But the energy signatures from Krell, they matched Chimera prototypes." Wren felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's failing heaters. "You're saying our own side is building monsters?" "Worse," Vela said. "They're selling them." The trio devised a plan. Lyra would return to the Vale Enclave as ordered, but with a tracker embedded in her diplomatic seal and a data spike hidden in her armor's lining. Wren and Vela would monitor from a safe distance, ready to extract her if things went south. Meanwhile, Vela would use her old intelligence contacts to trace the Chimera tech trail. The night before Lyra's departure, they met in the Whisperwind's cramped galley. Wren brewed synth coffee, bitter and weak, but hot. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do," she replied. "If Chimera is real, and if someone in command is behind it, then this war isn't just about territory. It's about who we become." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Just come back in one piece." She turned her hand, lacing her fingers with his. "Only if you promise not to blow up any more bases without me." "I make no promises," he said, but he squeezed her hand. The tribunal was held in the Hall of Echoes, a vast, circular chamber on the Vale Enclave, its walls lined with living crystal that amplified every word spoken within. Lyra stood alone at the center, facing a council of 7 Concord elders. Their faces were impassive, their silver robes gleaming. The charges were read: violation of neutrality, unauthorized combat engagement, collusion with non-Concord entities. Lyra defended herself with calm precision, citing the imminent threat at Krell, the strategic value of the intel she'd gathered, and the necessity of human Concord cooperation. But the elders weren't swayed. One by one, they voted for censure. Then, as the verdict was about to be sealed, Lyra activated the data spike. The crystal walls flared to life, not with echoes but with stolen files. Schematics of Chimera soldiers, transaction logs routing Concord tech to Skarn fronts, and a voice recording, clear, unmistakable, of General Torvak, the same grizzled commander who'd sent them to Helios Rift, negotiating a weapons deal with a Skarn warlord. Silence shattered. Chaos erupted. Elders shouted. Guards moved to seize Lyra, but she was already moving, darting toward an emergency exit. Outside, the Whisperwind screamed down from orbit. Wren at the controls, Vela manning the dorsal turret. They barely made it. Plasma fire seared the hull as they broke atmosphere. Behind them, the Vale Enclave went dark, its systems locked down in panic. Back in the safety of a smuggler's asteroid hideout, they pieced it together. Torvak wasn't acting alone. He was part of a cabal within the Alliance High Command, officers who believed the only way to win the war was to become as ruthless as the enemy. Chimera wasn't just a weapon, it was their legacy. "We can't go back to base," Vela said. studying a decrypted manifest. Half the fleet's command structure is compromised. So what do we do? Ren asked. Lyra looked at the star map glowing on the table. We find the Chimera Forge. The manifest pointed to a hidden facility on Xylos 9, a volcanic moon shrouded in perpetual ash storms. Intel suggested it was where the hybrid soldiers were being assembled and tested. Infiltrating Xylos 9 was suicide. The moon was ringed with automated defense platforms, its surface crawling with Chimera units. Hulking figures with human torsos grafted onto scarred exoskeletons, their eyes glowing with cold, artificial light. But it was the only lead. They landed in the caldera of a dormant volcano, the whisper wind cloaked under thermal blankets. The facility entrance was a steel maw in the rock face, guarded by 2 Chimera sentinels. Lyra disabled the external sensors with a pulse emitter while Ren and Vela took out the sentinels. Silent, brutal, efficient. Inside, the air reeked of antiseptic and burnt flesh. Hallways led to labs filled with tanks of suspended hybrids, their bodies twitching in nutrient fluid. In the central chamber, they found the core, a massive neural matrix humming with stolen concord and human brain patterns. And standing before it, overseeing the final activation sequence, was General Torvak himself. He turned as they entered, unsurprised. Ah, the traitors arrive. You're the traitor, Ren growled, rifle raised. Torvak smiled. I'm the realist. You think this war can be won with honor? With handshakes and shared coffee? The Skarn don't negotiate. They consume. So we give them something that consumes them. This isn't defense, Lyra said. It's perversion. Call it what you will, Torvak said, pressing a button on the console. But you're too late. Alarms blared. The neural matrix flared to life. In the tanks, the hybrids opened their eyes all at once. We have to destroy the core, Vela yelled over the rising hum. Ren laid down covering fire as Chimera units began breaking free from their tanks, limbs cracking as they hit the floor. Lyra sprinted for the console, dodging plasma blasts, her fingers flying over the interface. I can overload the matrix, she shouted. But it'll take 60 seconds. Buy her the time. Vela roared, unloading her heavy pistol into a charging hybrid. Ren fought like a man possessed, rolling, shooting, using the lab equipment as cover. One Chimera grabbed him, its claws sinking into his shoulder. He drove his combat knife into its eye socket and shoved it back into a tank, shattering the glass. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. 30 seconds. Torvak, seeing his creation about to be lost, drew a sidearm and aimed at her. Ren didn't think. He threw his knife. It spun through the air, end over end, and buried itself in Torvak's throat. The general dropped, gurgling. 10 seconds. Lyra cried. Go! Ren grabbed her arm, yanking her away as Vela tossed a plasma grenade into the core chamber. They ran. The explosion tore through the facility like a living thing. Fire, shrapnel, and a psychic scream that rattled their bones even through the rock. The Whisper Wind's engines roared to life as they scrambled aboard, the moon's surface cracking beneath them. They escaped just as Xylos 9's volcano erupted, burying the Chimera Forge under molten rock and ash. Back in orbit, battered but alive, they sat in stunned silence. The data they downloaded, proof of the Cabal, the Chimera program, Torvak's betrayal, was already being transmitted to every clean channel they could find. Independent news feeds, neutral diplomats, even Skarn defectors who opposed the warlords. The alliance would fracture. There would be purges, trials, maybe even civil war. But the truth was out. Days later, adrift in the quiet dark between stars, Lyra stood beside Ren on the Whisper Wind's observation deck. The ship was running on backup power, patched with scavenged parts, but it flew. They'll come for us, she said. The Cabal still has allies. Let them come, Ren replied. We've got a ship, a cause, and a hell of a story. She leaned into him, her white hair catching the starlight. What now? He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just an ally, not just a comrade, but the one person who understood the cost of doing what was right in a universe that rewarded cruelty. Now, he said, we find the others like us, the ones who still believe in something better. And as the Whisper Wind vanished into the nebula's embrace, leaving the war behind but carrying its truth forward, Ren knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Not as captain and ambassador, not as human and alien, but as something new. Something forged in fire, tempered by loss, and stubbornly, beautifully alive. Years later, on a quiet moon nestled in the outer spiral arm of the galaxy, Far from war rooms and burning battlefields, Ren and Lyra built a home among the silver pines of Alaris III. The house was modest. Stone walls, a sloped roof that caught the twin sunsets, and a wide porch where they drank morning tea as the mist curled through the trees. Lyra's white hair had grown long again, often braided with wildflowers by Ren's clumsy hands. His scars had faded, though she still traced them sometimes, not with sorrow, but with quiet pride. They never returned to formal service. Instead, they trained a new generation, Human, Concord, and others, teaching them that strength wasn't just in firepower, but in trust, in listening, in choosing mercy even when vengeance was easier. Their academy became a beacon not for soldiers but for peacekeepers. On the day they married beneath the twin suns, no generals attended, only friends. Vela, now running a network of truth seekers, a few Skarn defectors turned diplomats, and a handful of desert scouts from Zara 7 who'd once shared their last canteen with them. There was laughter, music woven from light and string, and a cake made from earth chocolate and Concord moonberries. Slightly lopsided, but delicious. They adopted 2 children, a human orphan from a ravaged colony and a young Concord hybrid whose parents had died resisting the Chimera program. At night, they'd sit by the fire, the kids asleep upstairs, and talk about everything and nothing. The taste of rain, the shape of distant galaxies, the stubbornness of garden weeds. The war never truly ended, but it no longer defined them. They had built something quieter, deeper. A life stitched together from chaos, yes, but held firm by love that had been tested in fire and chosen anyway. And when the stars blinked above their little moon, Ren would take Lyra's hand, blue against brown, and whisper, "Still the best decision I ever made." She'd smile, lean her head on his shoulder, and reply, "Mine too." They grew old slowly, side by side, watching their children, and their ideals, take root in a kinder world. And if sometimes, in dreams, they heard the echo of explosions or the hum of a dying bass, they'd wake, reach for each other in the dark, and remember. They had survived. Together, always together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.